Hi, I'm personally speaking this week. Our guest is Leland Vittert. You'll know him from NewsNation and, of course, from Fox News as well. He has written a book called Born Lucky. I think it's the best book I've read in years. He's our guest on Personally Speaking. Stay with us. Hello and welcome to Personally Speaking. I'm your host, Monsignor Jim Lisante, and veteran journalist Leland Vittert joins me now. Leland is the host of On Balance with Leland Vittert and serves as NewsNation's chief Washington anchor. Before joining NewsNation, Leland worked for Fox News from 2010 to 2021, starting as a foreign correspondent based in Jerusalem and later serving as an anchor and correspondent in Washington. He has written a new book called Born Lucky. The subtitle, A Dedicated Father, A Grateful Son, and My Journey with Autism. The autobiography tells about Leland's experience growing up with autism and his father's dedication to helping him succeed. Leland talks about his struggles with bullying and social challenges, his father's intensive coaching, and how he, who didn't speak a word until he was 3, has thrived in the communications business, becoming a hugely successful journalist. Leland is married to Rachel Putnam, and he's here to talk with us today about his life, his career, and how his father not only helped him overcome dealing with his autism, but helped him thrive and persevere and love. Joining me now, I'm so pleased to welcome to Personally Speaking, Leland Vittert. Leland Vittert, the book is called Born Lucky. I love it for our listeners and viewers. I often read books, but I have to tell my listeners and viewers, this is what I want you to get. One of the best books you will ever read. And Leland, thank you for writing it. Just because so much of it concerns being on the spectrum, the whole question of autism, and we throw those words around a lot. Can you, for our listeners and viewers, give us some sense of what is autism? What does being on the spectrum really mean?
Well, it's a great question, and thank you for having me. Born Lucky is the story of my father raising me and adapting me to the world rather than the world to me after I was diagnosed with autism. What's interesting about our story is he never told me that I was diagnosed with autism. Never told me that I was different. Never told my sister. Never told teachers, counselors. I never had any kind of therapist or anything like that. So I hate to try to be an expert on something that I'm not. I am on TV for a living, so that may be a little bit of a juxtaposition in theory. But I don't pretend to speak or have a voice for autism, because I think, as somebody once said, if you know a child with autism, you know one child with autism. It's different for so many different people. I think why Born Lucky has been so successful and why it's touched so many people, whether they have a child on the spectrum or not, why it's so clearly hope for every parent of a kid who's having a hard time, is because Born Lucky is really just a book about a father and a son. It's a love story. It's what my father gave up and how he dedicated himself to helping me when he had no idea how it was going to end up.
Leland Vittert is our guest. And, you're right. I had read years ago a book by Nicholas Sparks, I think his only nonfiction book, called Travels with My Brother, where he talks about dealing with his son's presence on the spectrum. And it was an entirely different story from yours. And you're right. Everyone is uniquely, wonderfully made. Let me just ask you, because it's fascinating to me. It's a book about your love affair with your dad, which is a beautiful story. But your dad also gives credit at the very end, as he should, to Carol, your mom.
Yep.
What's her role in this story?
As my dad put it, her role was really holding everybody together. And there's so many parts of the book where I really wanted to say thank you to different people. And people rightly point out, sort of, where's mom in all this? And does mom get his, and I think the real answer is she was this omnipresent force, both keeping me together and my dad together. The reason we focused on the part of dad was because I think he really understood what I needed, and he became my best and only friend. For 10 or 12 years, he was literally my only friend. So that part of the story, I think, sort of helped shape, especially in those early years. And he really had an understanding personally. In Born Lucky, there's these times that I'm experiencing almost exactly the same thing he did. When I was growing up, as I was, didn't have any friends and didn't get invited to anything and was being bullied all the time and on, he would tell me this story about his freshman year of college when he rushed the fraternities. And on bid night, when everybody gets their bids and joins their fraternity, he was the only freshman who did not have a bid. He was all by himself. He was left on a snowy night in Ripon College all by himself. His dad had died a year earlier. He said it was the second lowest night of his life, the first being the night that his father was died of a heart attack. So fast forward 35 years later, and I'm at Northwestern University. I'm rushing fraternities. I go to all the houses I want to join, and one by one, they tell me I'm not getting a bid. The last one tells me I'm not getting a bid, and I go down to the street in Evanston, Illinois, by myself in the snow, and I call my dad, and I said, Dad, now I'm just like you. So that through line, I think, of what my dad and I both went through together, I think explains in parts. Probably in today's language, you'd say he wasn't nearly as far on the spectrum as I was. He would be much more sort of normal to the mean than I was, or am. But I think he definitely understood sort of viscerally what I was going through.
Leland Vittert is our guest, and this is Born Lucky, the book we're talking about. I guess this is a book about your dad relationship, your love relationship with him, but it's also a book which many of us can relate to because it's the story of bullies in our lives. Mm-hmm. And you got bullied so badly and so viciously sometimes. I just got to ask you, because as a guy in the business of religion, I'm always talking, forgiveness. In the course of your life, when you look back on these guys who made your life miserable, how easy or how hard has it been for you, Leland, to forgive them?
It's a great question. And I've struggled with it a lot. I think you'll notice when you read the book that we didn't use any of their names, right?
Right. Yeah.
Didn't use the name of anybody who was mean to me. And it's not because I don't remember their names. I don't know if I've forgiven. I've certainly not forgotten.
Yeah.
But I did not grow up in a religious household in any way, shape, or form. But that power of forgiveness, what you realize, I think, and what I've realized over time, certainly recently, and certainly in writing the book, is that you don't forgive people for them, you forgive people for you, because it sets you free. And it is so powerful that you don't think about it anymore. You don't harbor the anger and the resentment and keep replaying it and keep wanting to deal with it. So I guess, yes, I've forgiven them. I always think that sort of my life has moved on, and that's just the way things are. They know who they are, and they have to deal with that themselves.
There's a guy in my parish, Joe Salomon, who created something called Long Island Coalition Against Bullying. And he told us a story recently of one guy, of the many people who bullied him growing up, who came back to say, I was a real ass to you, and I did terrible things to you, and I had years to think about it, and I just want to apologize. Has any bully in Leland's life?
Nope.
No. Okay. Wow.
No, it's the response to the book has been extraordinary. I have not heard from a single person of those who were mean or difficult or anything else to me, but I have heard from hundreds, if not thousands, of parents. Mm-hmm. I mean, every day I get 5 emails of parents saying, "Thank you for changing our lives. Thank you for telling us we're not alone. Thank you for showing us that there's hope." And it's not just kids with ADHD or anxiety or on the autism spectrum. So to that extent, that to me is way more meaningful, that I can help people going through what I went through, rather than somehow gain some type of I don't want to say retribution, but gain some type of redemption or forgiveness, or hear from someone who says, "Oh, I'm so sorry." Like that they're living their life.
Book is called Born Lucky, and another character in your life and in the book is Liberty, your sister. When I'm dealing with people again on Long Island who have a special child, a child who's challenged in a unique way, very often the other brothers and sisters will say, "Well, I grew up in a house where he or she was the focus, and I got left behind."
Right.
How did Liberty handle the fact that her brother was uniquely special, so much so that his dad quits his job to take good care of him?
Yeah. I think it's a great question, and it's something I didn't really realize as I started writing the book. I didn't quite understand what the effect had been on Liberty, and
Mm.
my mom, no doubt, she has this unique understanding. She said, I really think you need to talk to your sister about her experience. And I thought,
Mhm.
my sister's 38. She now has a child of her own,
Mhm.
highly successful, went to MIT, PhD in math, extraordinary mind, very successful in her own right, professionally. I said, really? And she said, yeah, you do. So I called Liberty and I said, okay, Liberty, tell me your first memory of me as your brother. She goes, oh, that's easy. She said, I was in kindergarten and you, meaning me, was in fifth grade. And every day in fifth grade, you would walk down from the classroom at the little elementary school I went to that I'd eventually get taken out of later that year, down to my kindergarten classroom. And you'd pick me up and we would walk home every day at 3 o'clock. I said, okay. And she said, every day we'd walk out of the classroom, out of the school, back through the PE fields that were in the back to the woods that led to our house. It was about a half a mile. And she said, every time we would get to the tree line and the path, you would start crying. And I would then hold your hand. And we would walk home together with you crying, me and me crying. And we would get home, and then mom and dad would sort of put you back together. And that's sort of what my mom always told my sister was, we have to put Lucky back together. And I think one of the things that my parents did really well, and Liberty will say this too, is it wasn't about, my parents helping me or my dad helping me. It was about our family as one unit fighting this fight. And as a family, I think that that's been a really important message for our whole lives. My parents have done an extraordinary job that our family is our family against the world. And we may fight and we may have difficulties. Look, and my sister got crushed at school because of me. She was known as the retarded kid's brother. When she started the same middle school, high school I went to, the 7th through 12th grade school, teachers came up to her and said, boy, I really hope you don't turn out like your brother. Those were what teachers said. The kids called her the retarded kid's brother. There was a big sister, little sister, big brother, little brother program. So 12th graders had like a kid in 7th grade. When I was in 12th grade, she was in 7th grade. No kid in my class, none of the girls in my class would be her big sister. So, she really went through it. And the flip side is, and I think it's just my parents' genius, she was far more and is far more protective of me than any of the rest of my family. I mean, you want to talk about somebody who is not forgiven? Liberty has not forgiven. Okay. Good luck if you ever cross her.
I like that kind of sister. I have
Yeah.
I have two of them of my own, but Leland, this program, Personally Speaking, I've always said, even though it appears on a lot of religious stations, I don't care whether people have religion or no religion, spirituality or not. I have atheists, agnostics. I mention that because however you were raised, I just got to believe we all have some sense of some kind of higher power. So I'm thinking back to Miss Saigon, the great song I always loved is Why God, Why? And I got to ask you, if there is a God in your life, did you ever shake your fist in his face and say, hey, why me? Why this particular burden?
You know, I appreciate the question. I don't think so.
Okay.
Um, it's just not how I was raised. It's interesting because I grew up, and for those who are listening, that this is sort of faith journey as part of that conversation. I understand that. My mom was raised Christian Scientist,
Mm.
and left the church in high school because she was at the Christian Science boarding school and overheard the nurse saying that she was going to die of a gangrene infection, telling her parents that she was going to die. And so she hitchhiked to a hospital and they saved her life, but she left
Good
the
for
church
her.
and said, I'm done with this. And then my father grew up in a Jewish household, but culturally Jewish because Jews who came over in the early 1900s as a way to escape anti-Semitism sort of became fiercely American
Hmm.
rather than sort of America became their religion. Um, and the American idea did. So that's where we both, sort of my parents came from. I didn't really sort of have any understanding of religion until I got to Jerusalem, for Fox News, and I worked
Hmm.
there for. That's actually my sister calling. Sorry, I thought I'd put it on. We talk a lot as a family. I've already talked to my dad a couple times today. It's
Great.
only 12:30, but I got to Jerusalem, and as you would know, Monsignor, the line "There's no atheist in a foxhole"
Hmm.
is quite true. So,
Yeah.
uh, but no, I've always I've never had that why me
Yeah.
anger thing, and I think that maybe that doesn't come from religion, but it comes from just good values.
Every week I get in my parish to do the weddings for people, and I always say it's an incredible leap of faith for anybody to get married because all you know is the past. You have no clue as to the future. So I got to ask you, in light of the challenging upbringing you've
Mhm.
had, the life you've lived, where do you get the courage from? Well, what is it about Rachel that makes you say, I will take the next step, not to just date a beautiful woman, but to marry one? Where does it come from? The ability to say, yes, I'll take that leap of faith. I'll marry Rachel.
Well, she's in the living room. I can yell and see if she wants to weigh in on this. Um, Hey, Rachel, we're going to start talking about you now. Uh, it's interesting because, both my parents and her parents have had just these incredible marriages, right? Her parents have been married 40 plus years. My parents have been married 50 plus years, which is unusual these days. To have that. And they're both each other's best friends. I'm her best friend. And I'm Rachel's best friend and she's my best friend. So I think for me, what it was is that I always wanted that. I always wanted that kind of love and partnership and commitment because I saw firsthand how wonderful it was and you know, how much it helped my parents together grow and to face challenges and to be better people. And, I always joke with, my parents that it's not that they're perfect people. I know them both. They're not perfect people, but they are perfect for each other. Um, and that's sort of what I felt like finding Rachel was. And I think both of us, Rachel and I, we got married when we were older. I was 42 when we got married. She was 37. Neither of us had been married. Neither of us had ever been engaged. And it was that we both waited until we could find what our parents had.
That's the best. That's the best reason to do it. If they're as good as you say, you'd want exactly that. Leland Vittert's book is called Born Lucky, and one of the endorsers of the book is someone he knows well, and we know well. He's a good friend of ours, Bill O'Reilly. He spoke in our parish this past May, packed the house as he does. But I mention it because one of my questions for him, similar to your own, was I said, in this present ruling class, you've got to believe that, got to say that Mr. Trump won the election in 2020. Bill said no, he didn't. And you have to also say January 6th wasn't such a big, terrible thing. And he says, no, it was terrible. And yet he continues to function. Leland, you've done much of the same thing. And I guess I would ask you what I asked Bill. The courage to tell the truth when you know what it will cost comes from where?
That just comes from my dad. I mean,
Mm.
that comes from my dad and from my grandfather. Um, in Inborn Lucky, there is this moment right after my dad's dad died. My dad was 16. He was getting ready for a date. He was upstairs in their house, shaving, and he looks in the mirror and he sees in the mirror his older brother, who's about 10 years older, who didn't live at the house. And he goes, Bruce, what are you doing here? And Bruce says to my dad, our dad died today, just now. And so my dad obviously is in shock, crushed, everything else. Very unexpected. It was a heart attack. And Bruce gets my dad and drives him down on a rainy night in November to the office, the family office. It was a little small construction company that my grandfather owned. And they go into my dad's office. It's an old, sort of old world office, the mahogany desk and everything else, and opens the safe in the office. And in the safe was a letter to his two boys, to my dad and his brother. In the letter, which we have in Born Lucky, says a man is defined by his character, not his accolades, not his net worth, not his achievements, not how big his house is, by his character. And that's what dad always taught me. And he always taught me that you can control two things. You can control your character and you can control your work ethic. And that's where that all comes from.
Leland Vittert's been our guest. I promise I'm going to wrap this up soon. I'm asking our listeners and viewers to please get Born Lucky. But maybe my last question kind of ties a lot of this together. We're living in this incredible culture of division, not just in America, but in the whole world. I got to ask you, with all you've been through and all you face as a newsman, as an anchor, as a man who sees some of the brutality of people, how does Leland Vittert keep hope alive?
Well, I know that love and goodness exist every day because I see it in how my mom treats my dad and how Rachel treats me and how my dog treats me. Um, and I think, when you've really seen evil up close and personal, right? And evil, I mean real evil, right? Like, which is what I saw in the Middle East and came face to face with terrorists and interviewed terrorists and in that saw that and felt that. I think it makes loving and believing in good and believing in investing in love all the more meaningful and all the more important because you know how fragile it is. And I think we think about the division in America right now, and I'm not a pundit, I'm a journalist, but you think about the division in America right now, and I think so much of it is because we have it so good. We don't really realize what evil is. We don't really realize how quickly we can lose this experiment. We don't really realize how special what we have in America is. And that to me is something that I learned and saw up close and personally overseas, which makes you cherish it and believe in it all the more.
I said that was the last question, and I lied. I need to go to confession, Leland. But
Okay.
before we began, you asked me about the pictures behind one of John Paul, one of my parents. My parents, like your own parents, have certainly been the best friends I ever had in my life. So no matter how old they lived, and my mom lived to 102, not good at handling them going home to God. When you've got a lifeline like Carol and your dad, can you imagine how your life will continue, how you will go on without these folks?
Boy, we're getting deep.
I'm sorry.
I didn't tell you, Monsignor. Okay, I have done 145 interviews for this book for Born Lucky. 145, and that is the first question that just, boy, that I have not gotten that question. It was like a baseball bat.
I'm
Oh,
sorry.
oh. Can you hands down win the toughest interview. It wasn't Steve Bannon. It wasn't Joe Scarborough. It wasn't Bill O'Reilly. Wow. I've thought about it because we've come close to losing them a couple times. Came close to losing my dad to a heart attack 15 years ago. I came close to losing my mom to meningitis, actually, when I was quite young. And in the book, I mean, my dad, when I was 5 years old, was within a couple of hours of death when we lived in Switzerland. So I've thought about it. I think if I'm going to be brutally honest in confession, just between you and I, it's why I wrote the book now.
Yeah.
I going to therapy at 43 years old, especially on national television, over and over and over again, is not exactly a bucket of fun. It's a little bit like sitting in a bathtub full of scissors, but you can think about the visual.
I do. Yes.
But at the same time, it was really important to me to do two things. One, to have dad understand that I understood the sacrifice he made. Two, I think I had a feeling that this book would really help a lot of people, that Born Lucky would really touch people and give them hope and show them they're not alone and do all the things it's doing and all the things that you've talked about. But the only way to do that was to really tell these stories in this very raw, completely real and unvarnished way. And I think a lot of people who know me have been very surprised by just how vulnerable I've been in this. And that's fine. It's the only way to tell a story and do a book. But I wanted to be able to get those stories out of him and to go through them with him while he could really still be part of this experience with me, and talk about these stories in this very raw and meaningful way that then would help a lot of other people.
I want to thank Leland Vittert for writing the book. I want to thank him for being a journalist. He said he's not a pundit, and he's not. If you watch him on NewsNation, if you've seen him on Fox, he's a straight shooter. I every day read the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times saying someplace in between is the truth. He's a truth sayer, and no more so than he is in Born Lucky. Leland, I know you from watching on the news, but reading this book, take this the right way. I mean this in the best holy way possible. I love you, man, for your honesty and goodness, and you're just a gift. And I hope every person listening, especially parents and grandparents and kids who struggle, get hold of this book. And I thank you from the bottom of my heart for writing it and for sharing it with us. Thanks for being on Personally Speaking, Leland.
Thank you, Monsignor. It's good to be with you. Appreciate it.
Thanks for being with us on Personally Speaking. If you need to reach me, you can do that at personallyspeakingpodcast@gmail.com. You've probably been listening to this program on the Catholic channel on Sirius XM. You can also watch it on YouTube, searching under Personally Speaking with Monsignor Jim Lisante. We're also on catholictv.org. You can see us on Facebook at Personally Speaking with Monsignor Jim Lisante and on Instagram at Personally Speaking Podcast. I'm privileged to serve as host and executive producer, Personally Speaking. Our producer is Lisa Jandovitz. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll be with you again next time on Personally Speaking.